Hello and welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Olivia and Sarah, senior content producer and editor of the Booktopian blog. And with me today is Sarah McDuling, our Kids and YA category manager. And our guest today is the one and only Jay Kristoff, here to talk about the last book in his lifelike trilogy, True Life. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, how you going? Good to be back.
It's so good to have you.
I feel like I was only here 5 minutes ago. I think I actually was here like last month. So
I feel like it's just a recurring chain of like we interview you, then we interview Amy, and then we interview both of you, and then it's you and Amy again. And
that's on you, Jay. You write
too many books.
This many books.
Yeah, I know. It's my fault. I'm bringing this on myself. It's a good problem to have.
It's great. A very good problem to have because True Life has just come out.
It has, yeah.
We both loved it.
Oh, good.
So much.
May have cried a couple of times, and there were a few near misses for certain people that I was like, you can't do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I am always interested to know what parts people got upset about.
Ooh.
Are we allowed to talk? I mean, it's out in the world now.
I feel like maybe we have a spoilery section in the second half.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay, yeah. Right, cool.
Yeah, because like you get quite close to it yourself as the author, so it's always interesting to know which parts resonate with other people.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you haven't read the book yet, we will give you a heads up when it's going to get spoilery. But for now, we'll try and stay spoiler free. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Sounds good. So I guess let's just start with how does it feel now that you've wrapped up this epic trilogy?
It's always a little bit bittersweet, which sounds a little bit cheesy, but you live with a group of characters for kind of 3 or 4 years. You grow quite attached to them, so saying goodbye to them can kind of feel like you're saying goodbye to an old friend. It's weird because the characters are imaginary; they only exist in your head. But after living with them for 3 or 4 years, they become proper little people. So knowing that you're never going to write them again, in all likelihood, is sometimes a little bit sad. But I try and comfort myself with the idea that I think I gave them the send off they deserved. And you just feel proud of it. Trilogy is a big thing, and writing this series was, it's been a really amazing time in my life, and this series will always be part of it. So yeah, I am happy but sad, as weird as that sounds.
That's such an interesting point because as readers, we can reread it. Like we can go back and read it. I don't know. Do authors do that? Like if you...
I don't. I don't. I feel like I never read... The last time I will read any of my books is on... I have a little ritual where I read the book. I tend to read it the day before because I'm a slow reader. So I'll read it the day before and the day of publication. And then I kind of put it away in my head and I never, ever go back to it ever again.
Wow.
If I'm writing a trilogy and I need to refer back to an event or a fact or a situation, then I'll go back and read a chunk of it. But I never read the book in its entirety after it comes out. I feel like I'm giving it to the world at that point. I'm giving it to the readers. It's not mine anymore. It's like kind of sending your kid off to university or whatever. It's out of your hands. So
yeah, but when you send your kid to university, you'll presumably see them again. I'm just struck by this idea of what a final goodbye it is for the author, because
it can feel quite sad, particularly if it's a series that you've been working on over the course of years. And like I said, my life has changed a great deal in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. I've become a full-time author and got to travel the world, and it's all because of books like this. So every one of them has a particular resonance and importance. It's kind of like closing off a chapter of your life almost. So yeah, it can be sad knowing that you're never going to see them again. So you hopefully leave them in a good place and kind of turn around and walk on to the next thing.
Well, you mentioned hoping that you'd given them a proper send-off, and I would just like to say you definitely have here.
Oh, good. Good. That's glad to hear.
And
book threes are always hard. Like endings are quite hard to stick sometimes. So it's gratifying to hear that when you pull it off.
I wanted to ask about that. You have in other podcasts about, I think about the Aurora series, we spoke to you about the fine balance of a trilogy and you know the way to pull that off. But when you get to the end of a trilogy like this one, and it feels so perfectly done, I can't help thinking like how much of the ending is in your head when you start that first book, because when it falls together so well, like I can't believe that you didn't have the whole story, like the entire trilogy in your head when you started, or did you? That's my question.
I mean, it depends what kind of theory you subscribe to. I mean, it all comes out of my head, so obviously it was in there somewhere. But in terms of being fully formed and crystal clear, no, it's absolutely not. You might have the vaguest idea. Like I knew the theme that I was going to be exploring through the trilogy. At the heart of the trilogy is the friendship between Eve and Lemon, and how that changes as they change as people. So I knew ultimately the story would end with a confrontation between those two. But when I was writing book one, I had no idea where those characters were going to be. I had a rough idea in terms of Eve's arc. I knew I was going to turn her into a villain. And ultimately her story would be one about, fall and rise. Ultimately I wanted it to be a redemptive arc, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with Lemon, other than conceptually she was a sidekick who was kind of thrust into a hero role. She was a character who never expected to have the spotlight on her. She doesn't really know what to do with it when she finds herself in it. But in terms of how that would play out and the geography and the choreography of it all, I had absolutely no idea. You kind of discover those, or I as a writer discover those things as I tell the story. So I have a vague idea that it will result in some kind of conflict, but other than that, no, I'm not clever enough to plan 3 books out. I wish I was, but I'm not that fast.
Wow, that's so it's like interesting. Magic.
Because everyone that I've talked to this book about, like, I think Deviate is one of my favorite, like, second in a trilogy books ever, and it just seems like every character was exactly where they needed to be, not only in terms of their own personal growth and development as a character, but also in terms of furthering the plot. Yeah, like everything just seemed so perfectly plotted out that I was like, surely he had this big billboard and was like moving them across.
Like Charlie from It's Always Sunny.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. No, I mean, in terms, it's kind of like making the sausage. You don't really want to know what goes into it. You just want to see the sausage at the end. Like, in terms of trial and error, because I am a pantser by nature, I make things up as I go. I tend to spend a lot of time wandering down dead ends and realizing things don't work. So because I write quite quickly in terms of word count, I can afford that. I can afford to waste 10,000 words pursuing a storyline that doesn't end up making it onto the page. And I hesitate to use the word waste because it's not wasted. You're still, learning something about a character or a situation or a motivation that you otherwise wouldn't have explored, but it doesn't actually make it past the editing process. But yeah, I tend to find the story by writing the story. So I'm glad it all looks seamless in the end, because it's certainly not seamless during the production. Like,
it definitely does.
You should talk to my wife sometimes about what I'm like to be around when things aren't going well. I'm just like in this puddle of misery on the lounge room floor every day. So I'm glad it all looks seamless in the end.
The effect is just masterful, and it really does feel like when you get to the end of that and you just think about the whole journey of all 3 books, it just feels as though it must have been completely carefully plotted from. All right.
Let's go with that theory. Let's tell everyone I'm extremely clever and no one listened to this podcast. Let's just pretend I know what I was doing all along. It's kind of funny that you bring up the second book thing, because popular wisdom is that second books are the most difficult in a trilogy to write, because you're not actually reaching any real resolution. You have to build up a climax and have a satisfying conclusion without ultimately concluding the plot, because there's obviously got to be a book 3 or a movie 3. But strangely enough, I find book 2s in my trilogies, almost universally, my book 2s are the strongest out of a lot of them. Like, I think Aurora Burning is a cooler book than Rising. I think God's Grave is a better book than Nevernight. I think Gemina is a better book than Illuminae. I don't know why. I think like second books to me are when you invert the premise of the story, where characters find out that the world isn't what they thought it was, or they are not who they thought they were, or their friends are their enemies are their friends. Like that inversion and subversion of the structures, I for some reason find really compelling, and I like being on cliffhangers as well. And book 2 is a really
we know
they're
that.
fun to revisit as well, because that's the moment in the overall story of the entire trilogy. That's the part where things are most unsettled, and like, you know, it's always fun to like relive the triumphant ending, or to like go back to the beginning, but that middle part, that's the juicy part.
Yeah, that's the part I enjoy writing the most, where I like the, you know, the all hope is gone moment, the dark moment before the dawn moment. And that, you know, in terms of a trilogy cycle, book 2 is where that happens. You know, it's where you put the characters in a situation where hopefully the reader can't see a way out of it, or you fundamentally challenge something that the character has taken for granted, and it completely changes them as a person. But that I'm not sure what it is about me as a person, or what it says about me, but I enjoy putting the character and the environment through that ringer and seeing what comes out the other end. And like I say, sometimes I don't know what's going to happen. I kind of throw these characters into a situation, and hopefully they become so realized in my head that they kind of act of their own volition, which sounds like something a crazy person would say. But once a character is real enough to you, they start to react in ways that sometimes you don't anticipate, and that leads the story into really interesting directions that you didn't foresee. So yeah, book 2 is a fun for me for some reason. Don't know why.
Fair enough. Kind of want to get back to something you said about like particularly Lemon, because I think she is my favorite character in like the whole series. Oh, I love her so much. And when you talked about her being going from a sidekick to a main character, and then she has one hell of a ride in this book as well, because she kind of ends on that really downbeat. Like the ending of Deviate is kind of devastating for her, and she's at the lowest point, and then it gets a little bit darker for her in this series. And
I mean, some of the themes that I'm exploring, they go to pretty dark places. I mean, the world that I have built here is the worst resolution of some of the paths I see us traveling down as a society. You know, in terms of nuclear proliferation. Good God, I can't even say the word. In terms of biological experimentation. So yeah, Lemon does go to some pretty nasty places with some pretty nasty people. But you know, like I say, she's a character who didn't really ever expect to be in that situation or have that spotlight shone upon her. So kind of taking that reluctant hero trope and applying it to her as a character was really fun. Because she reacted in ways that I totally didn't expect her to, because like I say, it sounds like something a lunatic says, but you know, the characters become so real to you that sometimes you want them to go in a particular direction because that's the way you planned the story, and they simply refuse. It doesn't ring true. And you find them doing things almost of their own accord. So yeah, she was a really cool pattern to explore some of those themes. Like, I don't want to come off as heavy-handed or an author on a soapbox, but yeah, I was exploring some of the technological issues that I see us, you know, the proliferation of artificial intelligence is a topic that I'm reasonably well read on and reasonably worried about. So that was themes that I was exploring here.
And there's so many themes here that I really enjoyed in this one, and because we're still in the spoiler-free section, I'll tread lightly, but I loved the way in which in this last book particularly you explored the idea of if it's possible to have free will to not have free will. Does that make sense?
I was just about to bring that up, because I think it's such an interesting theme in these books that you don't really think about, because the robots, you kind of like, oh yeah, they're sidekicks, but then they actually become characters that you become so like involved with, and you see their thought processes and how they struggle against like these 3 laws of robotics essentially.
That was one of the fun things I had with Fricot as a character, and Solomon, who is kind of like a devil's advocate, I guess, like playing in the grey lines between those 3 laws, because for a long time they were kind of even in real life robotic technology research and development, those 3 laws that Asimov laid down were seen as, if not laws, then at least guiding principles by which robotics would be explored. But when you start to, I guess, game those rule sets, you can do a lot while still adhering to the letter of the law, if not the spirit of the law. So Solomon was kind of a device by which Cricket could extend the boundaries of his free will while still not breaking the parameters under which he was coded. So that was a lot of fun to kind of play around with. Cricket was a fun character to write.
I love Cricket so much.
Testing the limits of humanity while working within those kind of hard-coded paradigms. He's probably my second fave character.
Me too.
And it's part of the joy of this series that the characters on the side, or the ones that you might initially overlook, really do take center stage. And nothing comes out the way you expect.
No, but I mean that kind of goes back to what I was saying. I had no idea what was going to happen to Cricket. Like if you had a conversation with me when I was writing book 1 and told me where Cricket was going to end up as a character, that would have surprised me just as much as it hopefully surprises the readers. Like, he became something totally different than what I initially imagined him to be. But that to me is the sign that I'm doing something right. When these characters start doing things that even surprise me as an author, odds are good they're going to surprise the reader. But it also means I'm kind of pushing myself as far as the characters and the stories themselves when they start doing things unexpected or ending up in places where I never imagined them to be initially. It feels like I'm
the trick of it. Like, maybe that's how you're able to do what we perceive as this magical, like, what comes off in the end as seeming like just pitch perfect plotting is the trick of it is not knowing yourself, and so you that like joy and surprise of discovery and like everything that happens to you while you're writing it just is infused in the story.
Yeah, I mean, I know writer friends of mine who are definite planners. They plan out everything meticulously before they begin, and they're absolutely horrified when I describe my process to them. The idea of writing 10,000 words and then just throwing them in the bin. Wandering down a road that ends up being a cul-de-sac. I have the luxury of time to do that because I write quickly and I get to do this full time. But also just in terms of the energy that gets spent and then doesn't get realized on the page is horrifying to some of my more planner-based writer buddies. But everyone's process is different. As long as you wind up with a good book that you're proud of at the end of the day, however you got there is the method that works for you. And obviously we have to be a little more careful in terms of planning when we're doing our co-authored stuff with Amy, because obviously you have to talk to your co-author about what you have planned, because they might have something completely different in mind. But yeah, that's one of the joys of writing solo. You have a little more freedom in that respect to kind of find the story in the process of telling it. But it's not for everyone. Like I have thrown out mountains of words over the course of writing all the books. I think on God's Grave, I think on Nevernight I threw out like 90,000 words.
Oh my god, that's like a whole book.
It's like a whole book. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. What happens to it all?
I mean, it goes into a folder, and some of the ideas get poached in later books in the series, or they get poached for later novel ideas in completely different series. And sometimes, the act of exploring that character in a situation just informs you as an author, and so that character better. Maybe that's part of them becoming so real and realized in my head, because I spend so much time kind of just throwing them into situations and seeing how they react, kind of spitballing with them, that they become very real, and I know them very well. But yeah, it's not a process for everybody, and some of my more meticulous planner friends are absolutely horrified by the notion. So, but like I say, whatever works for you works. Everyone is different, and everyone's process is different. As long as you finish the book at the end of it, then you did a good thing.
From a reader's perspective, I'm delighted, because I just want to read it all, even though I know that it's not.
Even though I'm not as smart as you think I am.
I'd say the opposite. I would definitely say if you are able to write 90,000 words and then it's all background info, that's like amazing level of world building and like character building.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, hopefully that's part of what makes the characters real. It's kind of, I guess it's thought experiments in a way. You're throwing them into a situation and seeing how they react. Even if you don't use that situation, you have a better understanding of who they are as people. And that, you know, in the scenes that you do include, that makes the reactions that they have and the lines that they take feel more genuine, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, shall we get into more spoilery territory now? Because I feel like Sarah and I are biting our tongues.
I know.
On a couple of
so many
things.
things I want to say that are definitely spoilery. So this is it, the big, like, ding, ding, ding alert that if you do not want to hear about what happens in true life, just stop listening right now.
If you get that warning, do you actually turn off the podcast or the?
No, because I love spoilers. Like,
yeah, I know you're one of those weird
persons.
you want to know what happens before it happens.
It depends on how invested in the story I am. For me, like, if I don't really care about it, I'll just be like, okay, what happens?
I just don't care if I know.
Do you skip to the end of the book? Like when you pick up the book, do you go and read the last page before you read the first?
No. The only time I would do that, I'm not saying I've never done it. The only time I would do it is if I'm struggling with a book and I just don't. There are too many books, right? So if I've gotten halfway through and I'm like, I'm not sure about this. Like if I've given it 200 or 300 pages of my time and I'm still not into it, then sometimes I will skip to the end just to see if the ending is like, wow, how do they get there? Then I'll keep reading.
Right. So you give a book 200 or 300 pages. Wow, I've got a hair trigger. Like if you haven't got me by 50 pages, you're done. I'm bounced out. There's too many books.
It depends on the book. Some books are only 300 pages. So if it's usually about the halfway point, or at least a third of the way through, if I'm like actively not into it, like if I'm really bored and just not feeling it, that might be a time that I skip to the end just to give myself a little sneak peek. And then often that does compel you to read, because often you'll be like, how on earth do these
get from A to
people that are boring me to tears end up there? And so then you keep reading, or you just put it down and move on to the next book.
Yeah. Yep. Life is short for bad books.
Yeah.
I'm also a very slow reader, so.
And I don't know, knowing what happens in a book only really often makes me curious to experience it. It never ruins it for me, and I get fascinated by how like phobic people are to know what happens in a story, because it's just not a thing I really get.
Even if it's a big twist, like a huge revelation, like.
But then, don't you want to experience it? Like, if I hear about some huge epic twist, I'm like, God, that sounds amazing. I have to read it. Like, it just doesn't. Obviously,
I think maybe people get upset about being robbed of that initial kind of blind gut reaction. Like, it can still be an amazing twist, and you can appreciate it for what it is, but you don't get to experience that visceral, like, oh my God, they did that. They killed that guy, or
Vader
was
like
Like
when I found out that it was, I mean, a moment that I was really glad wasn't spoiled for me was in the first book in Lifelike, was when we found out it was actually Lemon that's the deviant, not.
Yeah, right.
That was I remember going, oh my God, that's such a good twist, and I did not see that coming. And I messaged all my friends, they were like, how did you not see that coming? I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm dumb. But like, I'm glad I didn't see that twist coming.
I was too invested in the story.
Like, I have a couple of those friends who like, they say, oh, didn't you get it? It was obvious all along. I don't actually believe them. Like, I think some people pretend to be a little cleverer than they are when it comes to twists sometimes.
I take it with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, me too. They're not as smart as us, Sarah. They couldn't be smarter than us. I refuse to believe it.
I often feel like if you're fully engaged in a story and really enjoying it, the part of your brain that tries to figure out what's going to happen is distracted. So
Oh, me too. I
Yeah.
deliberately turn that part of my brain off. But my wife is the exact opposite. Like, she takes pride in being able to guess the twist before the twist happens. Like, and she's a huge like crime buff, crime procedural buff. And so she will make a call like 5 minutes into the show, like it was that guy or it was so and so. And I can't approach story that way. I want to be surprised and delighted. Like I would almost be bummed out if I guessed who the killer was or who done it before I get told who done it.
maybe it's a
But
crime reader thing, because I read a lot of crime, and I'm a bit like that myself. Like, I don't think I go in trying to figure it out, but if I go in and it's just okay and I'm not like totally lost in the story, that part of my brain wakes up and goes, hey, where do you think this is going?
Right.
And then I start having theories, and then the joy of those theories being right to me adds to the enjoyment.
Yeah, sure.
Wrong,
I mean,
then you get the surprise.
That's what you want as an author, to have laid the clues down so people can feel rewarded and clever if they figure it out, but not be so obvious that your average reader can figure it out. So people still get that sense of surprise and delight. Maybe I'm just trying to rationalize the fact that I'm not smart enough to ever figure out who the killer is, and my wife gets it right like 95% of the time. So.
I'm that person that will cycle through every person, like, I bet it's that person, and then by the end I've gone through every single person.
So
they're like,
right,
that doesn't count as guessing because you've just gone through every person.
Isn't the best one though the I don't know if this is the right expression, but I think it's called like the double blind or whatever, where you're like, they're building up to something and then it's like a twofold surprise. So people are like, I knew it, I was right, and then they get like sidelined by the second half of the surprise. That's my favorite.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But we didn't even talk about spoilers yet.
I know. We should probably go back to talking about Truelove.
We had such a big fan
talk about my book.
Starting the spoiler section,
yeah.
And then we
it's like a nice buffer zone for people that still haven't turned it off, or maybe they're in the bath or they've slipped over and can't get up.
You have a second chance, people. This is your last and final warning.
Actually, it.
The spoiler section begins in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so you mentioned before that it was a bittersweet feeling finishing this trilogy, but I'd also argue it's a bittersweet ending, even though most people, apart from kind of dear poor Cricket, get a good ending.
We have hope for Cricket though.
I know, but I'm still upset.
he'll be back. He can be rebuilt. That's the wonderful thing about being a robot. I
like that you leaned into that loophole. It's like, he can't really die, really.
I mean that kind of raises interesting questions as well. Like, when you rebuild him, is it him? Like, what actually makes him him? Is he just a collection of code and circuitry, or is his physicality part of what made him what he was? But
Cricket spin-off. I would read it.
Cricket solo adventures. Yeah, sure.
I would be so into that.
Oh yeah. But Eve is kind of the character that I think, even though she technically does get the happy ending, it's still bittersweet. And you mentioned that she goes on kind of a redemption arc. And like, I feel like the idea of a redemption arc is a bit dirty these days. People don't like seeing villains redeemed. They're like, once you've done something bad,
I do. I'm going to say I do.
I know. I love redemption arcs. I feel like that, so it's interesting to see Eve's story, because by book 2, I was like, I don't care about Eve anymore. She is dead to me. She is gone. But you see her more in True Life. I think I was just bitter. And it's her struggling with this idea that she knows it's wrong in her heart, what she's doing with all the other lifelikes. But it's just that separation of her own personal anguish and the situation and what she went through from the issues and anger of the lifelikes at large, and how that comes to head at the end is really
she's also
compelling.
confronted with the thought that everything that she is feeling, kind of from the revelation of who she is, she's wondering if it's even her feeling those things at all. Like, is she simply a product of the programming that makes her up? Like, she's constantly wrestling with the idea that I am only feeling the things I am feeling because I was made to feel that way. So her coming to grips with the idea that she is a genuine person above and beyond what she was created to be is something that she kind of wrestles with from the end of the first book. But I mean, I think her reactions are, if even if she's unlikable, I hopefully made her reactions understandable. You know, if you found out that your entire life was a lie, everyone that was close to you had been lying to you, I think your initial reaction would be rage, and that is her reaction in book 2. You know, she kind of loses herself in the anger of it all. And
I
book
think
3,
that was so well done. Like her brokenness over having her whole identity like just crumbled to dust.
yeah, and to find out that everyone around you was lying to you. Like some people knew, and other people were just lying about who they were. But literally everybody in book 1 is lying to Eve, and so these people that she kind of built her world around, and this bedrock upon which she laid her foundations, it all gets taken away from her. And the only people that offer her any solution, any way out, is Gabriel and her brothers and sisters. So yeah, hopefully, like I say, even if she's not likable, at least her reaction is sympathetic and understandable. Like putting myself in her shoes, yeah, I would be incredibly angry at the world. So I think her wanting to at least lash out initially is hopefully understandable.
Well,
definitely.
Through the worst of her actions, you still have, you know, Lemon and Cricket, and like you sort of want her to get her back for them as much as you want Eve to be okay. Like you worry about her, and you want her to come good for her, but you also just want it for the other people that you love. Like,
yeah, because they love her. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You just want.
But that kind of comes back, like the bedrock of the series is really the friendship between Eve and Lemon. Like when I set out writing the series, I wanted to, you know, do a Professor X Magneto type friendship where you had two people who, you know, grew up together and genuinely care about each other, but ideologically they just can't come to an agreement. You know, the things they want are fundamentally opposed to each other. And you can understand both points of view. One is obviously a little more sympathetic than the other. Lemon is more traditionally a good guy, I guess. But hopefully if you put yourself in Eve's shoes, you can understand why she is the way she is and why she does the things that she does. I think that's what makes a good villain. When if you were to sit down and have a coffee with that villain, they would be able to explain clearly and articulate exactly why they're doing the things that they do, and believe that they're ultimately doing the right thing. You know, from Eve's point of view, she's fighting for her own identity, but she's also fighting for the existence of her kind. You know, there's only 13 of them initially, but you know, they are the only ones of their kind on the planet, and so being protective of these beings who are essentially her only family, it's hopefully understandable to the reader, even if, like I say, she does do some pretty awful things.
Yeah, and it's that idea that she has she has a complete lack of agency from the second she finds out she's not what she thinks she is, which is something that both Lemon and Eve go through. Like, Lemon gets essentially experimented on and cloned against her will by biomass, and then Eve is pretty much that was awful.
Rough.
That was so rough.
I was dying in that part. Like, my heart broke.
Yeah, that really felt like the moment where Lemon kind of grows up, kind of becomes an adult, I guess. Like, up until then, even through book 2, like, she goes through some rough patches, but she's still kind of the sassy, wisecracking sidekick persona for a lot of it, even though people are looking at her more and more in a hero leader type role. I feel like what happens to her in Biomass is really what catalyzes her into the character that she ends up becoming. She has to go through some pretty awful stuff to get where she needs to.
She's brought so low.
Yeah, it's very much a trial by fire. I felt quite bad when I was writing that part, because like I say, Lemon's probably my favorite character in the whole series. And she goes through a pretty rough patch in this book set.
I think she's definitely
he says,
my
laughing.
favorite. That's why I'm so glad, and that's why I think there's when you've done all of that to a character, I was so relieved that you didn't kill Grimm, because
I thought Grimm was a goner. I was like, Grimm is going to die and I'm going to cry again.
I really did. I wasn't sure. I thought there was a chance you might let one of them come through it. Excuse me.
Oh, did you think I was going to kill them both? That'd be rough.
Well, I really did. And then I was like, no, maybe it'll just be one. But then which one?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's good. I mean, that's the kind of fear that I want to instill. That's the kind of fear that I need as a reader or a viewer or whatever to really enjoy a show. Like, obviously, nobody wants to watch or read a story where the villains win. You know, standing atop a pile of the heroes' bodies and laughing maniacally, credits roll. Like, nobody wants to see that. But to enjoy a story, I need to feel like that could be a possibility. Deep down, I have this kind of unspoken contract with the storyteller that they're probably not going to do that because, you know, that kind of nihilism is too bleak for most to enjoy. But I need to feel the fear that is a possibility. That some
and it was with those guys.
Yeah,
because
the stakes are so high.
Like, I was like, he could do it. He might. Because I remember getting to the end of Deviate and just being like, oh, crap. Like, I think that contract the contract with Jay that you saw at the beginning of this, you kind of reasonably hope that Lemon and Eve will come to some kind of understanding at the end. Like, it still was, for me, still up in the air over whether both would survive, but you think they're going to make it until the end of the trilogy, right?
Right.
But characters like Diesel and Grim, they're up for grabs. Like, I really didn't know. And I was so relieved when they came through. And they had a really good book in True Life.
I am glad that you were afraid. That's, you know, like I say, that's what I need when I am being told a story. So that's the kind of attention that I try to build into the stories that I write. I need you to be afraid for the characters that you love.
I knew Fix was a goner. As soon as I found out his power was what's the word I'm looking for?
Like regeneration.
Regeneration. I was like, oh, he can't live because otherwise no one would die because he would just help them. He's gonna.
Yes, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, you got to kill the
brain that part of your brain was active at that point.
It really was. I was like, he's gonna, and I love him already.
Yeah, that's quite clever. It's kind of like playing, like playing first-person shooter. You always got to kill the healer first. You don't go for the damage dealer. You go for the healer because if you keep the hero alive, then everyone can stay alive. That's actually really good philosophy. I hadn't thought about it that way. But yes, it's true. You got to kill the heals first.
What a devastating death that was, though. I was so pleased that that you didn't sort of just leave it all. Like there was a proper funeral and like a proper moment.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of Diesel's arc in the third book, really. Like, she's just coming to grips with that loss as a character. Like, I didn't have enough time or pages to kind of explore that relationship, and Diesel is still kind of a B character, but yeah, that's the struggle that she has with over the course of that book, where she assigns the blame and coming to the right frame of mind about it at the end. Like, she kind of displaces a lot of her anger onto Abraham. So, and that's kind of a metaphor.
Abraham. Holy crap, this book.
I'm glad you liked it.
It was so good. I do want to talk about Abraham, but just while we're on the Grim and Diesel kind of, because they kind of like a bit of a pair.
Yeah.
When I wanted to ask you, like, Grim kind of reminded me a bit of you. Did you see yourself in Grim?
Oh, really? In what way?
Just in the way that he claims to have a really black heart.
Are you saying I don't? What are you implying, Sarah? I'm bad to the bone.
I think you have a mighty heart, Jay, but I don't think it's black. I think it revels in some shadowy places.
I mean, every character that an author makes has a part of themselves in there. You're kind of drawing on yourself for most of the characters that you create, but it wasn't something that I did consciously. I'm probably glad to hear it. Grim is a cool character, and he's a nice guy. So I'm glad you see me in him rather than me in a character like Gabriel or whatever, or Preacher. But I mean, there are elements of me in those characters as well. They're kind of different parts of your personality dialed up or dialed down. But yeah, Grim is kind of a protector figure, I guess. He's he's a good-hearted guy. So I'm glad you see some parallels there with me. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you, Sarah.
Preacher sounds like, Preacher seems like he would have been so much fun to write.
Yeah, he was great. And he ended up going in very different places that I expected as well. Like, I didn't honestly know that he was going to be a recurring figure in the books. I didn't, there's a question mark over whether he's even alive at the end of book 1. But when I kind of stumbled across the idea of taking him and Ezekiel on what is essentially like a buddy road trip.
I was so here for that.
So
I was like, I just want Preacher and Ezekiel buddy cop adventures.
Yeah, well, they just
Forever.
already took like this 3-hour conversations with them about life, the universe, and everything. Yeah, like he was a really cool way for Ezekiel to kind of question his own worldview and his motivations for doing what he was doing, because Preacher is kind of straight talker, no BS kind of guy who will tell you exactly how it is, regardless of how it makes you feel. But yeah, he was a good for a light to, or I guess a mirror to be held up on Ezekiel and make him examine exactly why he was doing the things he was doing, because Ezekiel's a pretty confused character throughout the narrative. Like he in many ways he's a kid. Like he's only 2 years old. He doesn't really understand who he is and what he wants. So yeah, Preacher was a good foil for that.
He's such a precious soul.
I know.
Yeah, he's
not
sweet.
Preacher, obviously.
No.
But
that was one of the points where I cried. I thought you killed him right when he's captured again by his brothers and sisters, and like everything went black, and I'm like, oh my god, he's dead. You didn't just do that.
God, it was stressful.
Yeah.
Thinking back to that sort of last movement of True Life, I think I had so many heart attacks. Like I was it was really stressful in the best way possible. But like,
oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
Oh man, and so can we take a moment for Abe?
Oh,
or Abe.
Abe.
Yeah,
someone
had to go.
That was a very moving moment, and it allowed for that fantastic moment later where the Brotherhood kind of shows up. As like the cavalry.
Yeah, sure.
But man, like, I know we've discussed at length how you kind of don't plot very far in advance, but at what point during the writing of True Life did you know who was going to make it and who wasn't going to make it?
In terms of Abe going, I probably knew about halfway, because I knew I needed something that would motivate his mother. His mother is just fanatic, and it's very difficult to break through to people who believe wholly and solely in the things they're doing because they're mandated from a higher power. So I knew I needed something, world breaking to make her shift the leaders. So yeah, the targets were on him from kind of the halfway point, but I knew I needed to poleaxe somebody in that final sequence, because you need the reader to believe that anyone could go. So it's an old trick from the Joss Whedon playbook. Like, I don't know.
Oh my god, are you going to talk about Wash?
Yeah, talk about Wash. Like, that's the classic move.
Oh, that's one of the most.
You take the sweetest, nicest guy and you just straight up murder him.
Oh
like everybody who's watching that show now.
On the wind.
Everybody's free game. Like, if you can kill Wash, you can kill anybody. So killing Abe was kind of the same thought. Like, as soon as you kill this sweet, nice, good-hearted, probably the purest-hearted guy out of a lot of them, as soon as he gets on the chopping block, then you realize that everybody is fair game and maybe nobody's going to come out of this alive. So yeah, that's one for the Whedon playbook.
I mean, it was masterfully done, but also we were already at that point. Like, it was definitely.
But you got to actually pull the trigger. Like, you can't keep shying away. Like, there are enough moments in there where you think they're dead, but no, they're not. If you keep doing that over and over again, the reader feels a bit cheated after a while. I think it feels like you're pulling one over them. So yeah, you have to pull the trigger a couple of times. You
gave our people such a great happy ending in a way, like bittersweet, sure.
I mean, it is sad in the sense that the world is still kind of broken, and I didn't want to write a story where everything is fixed by a silver bullet, because ultimately the world is an exploration of where I can see us potentially going in terms of, the wastefulness of our society, the way we so frivolously use finite resources, the way that we are hopelessly wedded to fossil fuels. If we continue down this path, we will end up in a place, it may not be similar to the world that I built, but it will be just as bad. So I didn't want to pretend like you just wave a magic wand and things will be fixed. At the end of this book, the world is still in a terrible place, but hopefully I give a sense that there are people working for the betterment of it, and maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But
I definitely think
it wouldn't have it wouldn't have felt right for that world that I built.
Yeah, well, it's perfect, but considering everything that comes up to it, I guess that happy ending has to be earned, and like that's, and hence Abe, I guess. But wow.
Yeah, but I mean, everyone kind of loses something of themselves, like. I think the price that Lemon pays is her innocence. Like, she's just not the girl she was at the start of that story. Eve has to rebuild herself from the ground up in terms of her personality and kind of learn who she truly is. Zeke has to examine, what he genuinely feels and why. Whether the things that he felt for Anna were real at all, and come to his own genuine personal feelings about Eve. So yeah, everyone kind of goes through a trial by fire, and everyone kind of loses.
Cricket.
Yeah, poor Cricket.
Well, I think we're running out of time, so we'll have to wrap it up, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Can we just quickly one more thing?
Sure.
I just want to talk about what happens to Solomon when he's when he's essentially given
free will.
Yeah, it was so not what I expected, and I thought that was fascinating. Like, what would happen to a mind to be freed like that? And I don't know, I just thought that was, I basically just wanted to say that part was really well done. I didn't really have a question attached to it.
Oh, cool. I'm glad. Yeah, I mean,
just an emotion.
I guess it's a metaphor for anyone who's kind of living under a set of under indoctrination, I guess. If you build a foundation upon a very specific set of rules, and then you have those rules challenged or broken in front of you, I guess it kind of deconstructs you as a person, and you have a choice there to kind of rebuild yourself from the ground up like Eve does, or you kind of fly to pieces like Solomon did, and that kind of is a test of character, I guess. But like challenging preconceptions and people's beliefs in terms of the way the world is or should be is one of the themes that I was trying to explore in the book. So yeah, I'm glad it worked. I'm glad you found it interesting.
It definitely did.
Good.
All right, Liv, I'm gonna stop asking questions now.
I feel like Nick has his hand hovering over the end call buttons. Shut up.
Stop talking. Yeah.
Well, I think we could keep talking about this series and pretty much all of your books forever, but we will wrap it up. Thanks so much for coming, or not coming, but joining us on the call. Just write about True Life.
Thanks for having me back. Great. It's always awesome to talk to you guys, and thanks so much for the support that you give my books and all Australian authors. You guys do amazing things, so please keep it up. We love you.
Oh, I can hardly believe it's a job sometimes. It's just so much fun.
Well, thank you for all you do. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Nick. Thank you. Okay, so if you're listening at home, I know, we're both gone all blushy.
Sorry.
Back on track. Thanks for listening at home, everyone. If you're interested, you can buy a copy of True Life from booktopia.com.au or your local bookstore. And thanks again for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces, and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.